And it looks like it is now 10 o'clock, and that means it is time for class to begin. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, Rylan. For those of you that are checking in and saying good morning, be aware. I recognize it and I see you. I just can't respond to everybody at this point because we need to get class started. But I see all of you like Danny and Eugene, Oregon, that just checked in. So good morning to all of you, okay? All right. First, let me talk about the schedule. All right. This Friday, we will be doing a class on pterosaurs. And I will let you guys know that in doing the research and preparing for it, it is incredible because you're going to see some of the neatest looking pterosaurs you have ever seen. I mean, these things are so cool. So Friday at 10 o'clock Central Time, same time as we are right now, we will be doing a class on pterosaurs. The class for Tuesday, May the 5th is a voter's choice. If you look on the Dinosaur George Jr. Facebook page, scroll down till you find it, you can vote on the topic of your choice. The highest ranked one, the one that gets the most votes, will be the show that we will do, and I will announce that on this Friday. Remember, make sure to click on the one you want. Don't write at the bottom which one you want because that doesn't count. I can't add your votes for you. I don't have any control over that. So if there's one of those three that you would like to do, then please make sure to vote on that thing so we know which ones to do, okay? All right, a couple of other things. Always got to talk about this. The private lessons that I'm doing I am having the time of my life. They are so much fun. I've done a bunch of them. Right now, the normal price for an online lesson is $125, but between now and the end of May, if you do your show during the month of May, we have reduced the price to $50. And to get that, when you go to the website, you go to the catalog, select whatever topic you want, and click on it. And when it takes you to the order page, there's a place where you can enter a coupon code. Enter the word SALE, S-A-L-E, and that price will be reduced to only $50. But that's only good through the month of May. And some people have had whole classrooms. I've spoken to whole classrooms. I did one show out of the state where there was 3 different classrooms that joined. I did a show for one individual. We just talked back and forth. So whatever you want to do, if you're interested in this, please feel free to sign up. And I would love to do a class for you and your friends. And we mostly do it through Zoom. That's the easiest. But if you already have a Facebook group, I can do a Facebook Live show for you, but you have to be in a group. Otherwise, everybody in the world can see it. Now, the downside to Facebook, of course, is I can't talk to you, interact. I can answer your messages, but I can't interact with you. With Zoom, of course, I can actually hear you and I can actually speak back and forth. And then finally, on the copy of my book, if you want a signed autographed copy of my book, you can pre-order it through my website, which is dinosaurgeorge.com. You can pre-order it through there. But I don't ship out of the country through my website. If you live out of the country and you want a copy, then you can order that through Amazon. But unfortunately, I can't sign the ones from Amazon because I don't see them. Amazon ships them and sends them. I don't have the books. I don't send them to Amazon. The publisher deals with Amazon. So I don't really have any connection to those through Amazon. And again, those books will probably be in June. All right. So today's lesson is to talk about the mistakes that have been made, and some of these mistakes occur over and over. Now, be aware, when scientists were first studying dinosaurs, they didn't have all the information we do today. So the mistakes that they made are not, we have to understand that. We have to give them a little leeway, right? Because some of their mistakes were based off of very little knowledge. Like, for instance, one of the biggest mistakes they made was that dinosaurs were tail-dragging, slow-moving lizards. And that's not true. And now we all know that the evidence proves that these animals did not drag their tail. Now, the reason why I bring this up as a mistake was because I still see pictures sometimes of dinosaurs dragging their tails. Sometimes people will take me to a track site, like on their property where there's dinosaur footprints, and they'll say, I don't see where it drug its tail. And you explain they didn't drag their tail. So that's still perpetuated. So people still believe that some of these dinosaurs were tail draggers. In fact, Probably one of the craziest things, sauropods, the big long-necked dinosaurs. Well, see, scientists thought that dinosaurs were lizards, not reptiles, but actual lizards. And the lizard's legs stick out to the side of its body, right? Well, if you take a big dinosaur like a sauropod and you make his legs stick out to the side, his stomach is going to actually touch the ground. Now, this is a mistake that scientists made at one time where they thought that these sauropods had their legs sticking out to the side. And somebody said, well, wait a minute. If their tummies drag the ground, how do they walk? This is a true story. Some scientists then said maybe what they did is when they were babies and they walked, their tummies dragged just a little bit. And as they got bigger and bigger, their tummies dragged more. And that would have left these little valleys all over the world. Scientists thought that the long-necked dinosaur stomachs were hanging down in those little valleys, and their arms and legs were out to the side, and that's how they walked. I'm serious. They actually believed, because they were so certain that their legs were out to the side like a lizard, that instead of recognizing that's not how the body put together, instead they came up with the idea that if your stomach was hanging between your legs, then there must be these little valleys that you've plowed around and made for yourself. So that is what they used to think. Now, nobody says that anymore. I'm happy to say nobody says that anymore. But that was just a mistake that I thought all of you would like, because it's pretty amazing. Okay, another one that again, and I see this a lot. I see this a whole lot. A lot of it, people think dinosaurs all lived in swamps. They only lived in swamps. They only lived where it was hot and humid and a swamp. And that could not be any farther from the truth. There are dinosaurs that we refer to as polar dinosaurs who lived in places that experienced snow and winter. They experienced winter. They're just like animals today. Do you know in Australia, at a time during, I think it was the late Cretaceous in Australia, if you lived in Australia during the late Cretaceous, they experienced, I believe, sometimes 3 months of total darkness because they were close to the pole. They experienced total darkness because of their closeness to the South Pole. That means that dinosaurs living there are dealing with freezing temperatures. So, and dinosaurs lived there at the time. They didn't leave. They lived there during that time. So dinosaurs have the ability to live in a variety of different environments. For instance, Tyrannosaurus Rex. My best guess is Tyrannosaurus Rex during the winter woke up to snow and ice. T-Rex may have seen it snow. Now, winters were not as bad as they are today in the places that it used to live, like in South Dakota, Montana, Canada, places like that. No, the winters are much more harsh, but there was winter. So when I see pictures of dinosaurs and they only live in a swamp, that frustrates me a little bit because that's not true. Dinosaurs lived in the floodplains. They lived in desert environments. They lived, you know what? Dinosaurs probably even lived in the mountains. But the problem with living in a mountain, now think back on a class I taught you about the fossilization process. To be turned into a fossil, you have to be buried in sediment. You're less likely to be buried in sediment living in the mountains as you are in the lowland floodplains. Because see, when you live in the mountains and it rains, that water washes past you. It can still bury you, maybe, but not as easily. If you live in the lowlands, where all of the water from all of the mountains is coming together, there's a much greater chance of you being trapped by a flood or your body being buried. So we do not know very much about the dinosaurs that lived in the mountains, but I guarantee you they were there. I guarantee you dinosaurs were there. So never think of a dinosaur as an animal that lived in a swamp. Just remember that these dinosaurs lived in places that range from hot, dry desert to freezing cold temperatures. All right, the one that bothers me the most about dinosaurs, the one that I hear all the time, is people that don't understand what is and is not a dinosaur. This is probably the most common mistake. Now, when I say it, it bothers me. What I mean by that is I don't get mad, but it is frustrating because dinosaurs, well, let me give you an image. Here's 4 animals that are constantly being talked about as being dinosaurs. The first one at the top with the sail on his back, that's Dimetrodon. To this day, I can see children's books where they show a picture of Dimetrodon. And to this day, if you buy a bag of dinosaur toys, you're almost always going to get a Dimetrodon in there. It looks so dinosaur-ish that I understand people who don't study dinosaurs don't know what it is. But it's a very frustrating thing because that animal was dead long, millions of years before dinosaurs ever showed up. That animal was gone. Well, okay, it was millions of years. They were gone before dinosaurs ever showed up. So it's frustrating that they're always included as a dinosaur. The pterodactyl, the one with the wings, that animal is not a dinosaur. Now, I understand the confusion of that because look, there's not a dinosaur book that you don't open that doesn't have a picture of a pterodactyl flying over the top of the dinosaurs. Now, just because they live together doesn't mean they belong to the same family. So pterodactyls are not dinosaurs, even though they lived at the same time and in the same place. Saber-toothed cats have nothing whatsoever to do with dinosaurs. Just like Dimetrodon, the one with the sail, saber-tooths come along millions of years after the age of dinosaurs. Those animals are mammals, and they have nothing to do with dinosaurs in any way, shape, or form. And finally, the one that is probably the most common is people saying alligators and crocodiles are dinosaurs. One of my favorite shows that I love to watch is the shows about the zoos, both over in Europe and here in the United States, the behind the scenes of what goes on in the zoo. I find those shows fascinating. I like them very much. But I have heard on 2 different occasions where the person who's taking care of an alligator or crocodile will say alligators are dinosaurs. And that's so frustrating to hear because they're not. They are related to dinosaurs, but they are not dinosaurs. So that would be like saying a lizard is a snake, but they're not, right? A lizard is not a snake. A turtle is not a lizard. Even though they're related, doesn't mean they're the same thing. So whenever I see that people list any of these animals as dinosaurs, it's a little bit frustrating because that's just not true. And as for the animal called the pterosaur, pterosaur is, well, we'll learn about this on Friday, but there's a lot of misconceptions, and that one of them is that they're all called pterodactyl. And that's not true. So I'll talk about that on Friday, but that's a good point. I happen to see that flash by the screen. That's a very good point. All right, let me show you guys the book that changed my life. This is the book that changed my life. When I was a little kid, this was the first book I ever bought during the book fair, and it was the first book that I read cover to cover. I probably read it 100 times. And I would lay in bed with a flashlight looking at the pictures, and I wished and I prayed that I could find a genie with a magic lamp, that I could rub the lamp and that genie would grant me the wish of going back to see these live. I remember looking at this. Well, there are pictures in here. Now, this book was written back in 1975. So this book was written in 1975. So like I told you guys before, oh, I'm sorry. Wait, I think this book was written in 1965. Yes, it was written in 1965. I was born in 1961. This book was written in 1965. Now, again, we have to remember scientists didn't have the same information that they do today. But there is an image in here that I want you to see, and this is the one that I spent so much time looking at. It is the image of that Brachiosaurus standing in the water, standing in the ocean. And I would sit there and I would daydream about it. I'd be like, man, I wonder if sharks bit him. I wonder if that happened. Well, this is a picture that's been perpetuated over and over and over again. Hundreds of children's books show images of these animals standing in the water all the way up to their neck. Hundreds of pieces of documentation show images that these animals' long necks were used to allow them to be in deep water. Well, Here are the 3 reasons why that is not realistic, why that didn't happen. Number 1 is something called water pressure. Water pressure. Okay. When you go into the water, water squeezes on you. You may not know that, but water squeezes you. The deeper you go, the harder it squeezes. That is why, have you ever dove under the water and you feel your ears pop? That pop is basically air being squeezed out because the water is squeezing you. You don't know it, but it's squeezing you. The deeper you go, the harder it squeezes you. That's why certain submarines can only go to a certain depth. If they go any deeper, the water pressure squeezes them. When I was a kid, one of the things that I thought would be so cool is I thought if I took a garden hose and I put it in my mouth and I went underwater, I thought I could breathe, right? Why not? I can breathe through a garden hose anytime I want. But when you go under the water, pressure begins to squeeze the hose. Now, it doesn't squeeze the hose shut. The pressure stops the air from moving in and out of it. You cannot breathe through a garden hose underwater because the water pressure stops the air from moving back and forth. Well, the exact same thing would happen to the neck of Brachiosaurus. It could not breathe for 2 reasons. Number 1, the pressure would be squeezing the air in its throat. It may not squeeze the throat closed, but it would stop the air molecules from moving. They can't move. It's like somebody put the brakes on at the front of the line and there's a big traffic jam of oxygen trying to get in and out. It doesn't work. But the other reason why is because the amount of water pressure on its lungs, it would be very, very hard for that animal to... Do you know when a whale when it lands on the beach, it's not going to die from sunlight at first. They die because their body is not strong enough to open and close their lungs. The weight of their body is stopping their lungs from working. They cannot breathe. It would be like if somebody put you in a giant bear hug and squeezed you so hard that you can't breathe. That's because they didn't squeeze your lungs closed. They prevented your body from being able to have the strength to open and close your lungs to breathe. So the big sauropods standing in the water are not going to happen. Those are the 2 main reasons. Next, the evidence. When we find the teeth of a sauropod, that is a long-necked dinosaur, their teeth are made for raking very tough plants off of the limbs, like conifer needles. Their teeth are not made for chewing. Their teeth are just made for raking. But because they're raking those teeth along real hard things, it wears them down. They become smooth on the back where they wear them down. Think of the tooth as being like this, and my hand is a bunch of, let's imagine my hand is pine needles, and he puts his teeth over it, and he closes it, and he rakes back, and he pulls off all the pine needles. Well, that raking rubs his teeth flat. So when we find sauropods, their teeth are rubbed flat from eating something very hard. If these animals lived in the water, they would be eating water plants. Water plants are very soft, very easy to chew. Their teeth would not have any scratch marks, and they wouldn't be worn down because they would be eating something very, very soft. So those are the 2 main reasons why we know that sauropods did not snorkel in the water. And then, of course, there's the problem of, they could only go into a certain depth with their neck, right? They can't go anywhere they want. So if you did live in the water, but you could only go to one depth, you're going to eat all of the plants between the shore and you. There's not going to be any plants left for anybody to eat. Oh, there's plants further out there in the water, but you can't go out there because you can't come back again. So, but the last reason why this is not realistic and why this is an error is because when they find sauropod skeletons are not found in lakes and rivers. They are found in what used to be forested areas. They're found in the lowland floodplains. They're found on dry, or what was dry land at the time they died. If they were living their life in the water, they would die in the water, and that's where we would find them. And how do you know it's dry land that they were on? Because geology. If I found a sauropod skeleton and all around it I found fish skeletons, crabs, snails, oysters, that tells me that animal was in the water. Well, we don't find that stuff around sauropods. We find fossilized ferns and fossilized conifers, and those are land plants. So this is a mistake that I've seen perpetuated, but I still want you to know that even though that was a mistake, it didn't change the fact that this changed. Absolutely was the book that changed my whole life. It's the book I love the most. So it's nothing wrong with mistakes that were made if it still encourages you to read, and that one did. Now, for the one that does bother me, this one bothers me a lot. When you see this picture, what are the things you think about when you see this? If any of you can type on there, tell me, what do you think happens when you see this picture? What's the first thing that comes to your mind about this animal? The number one thing that comes to my mind is the words I hear all the time. Their brain was the size of a walnut, and Stegosaurus has 2 brains. Those 2 mistakes are still made today in children's books. I get frustrated when I look at a children's book that I can tell was not written by anybody that knew anything about dinosaurs. They just took somebody else's children's books and copied what they saw. You can tell immediately. It's the minute you see it, you can instantly tell, because those books have nothing whatsoever to do with the facts. So when you see Stegosaurus, this is the one that drives me crazy, because they still talk about Stegosaurus had 2 brains and its brain was the size of a walnut. Well, first let me explain where the idea of 2 brains comes from. In the spinal column, that means where all of the backbones are, near the hips, scientists found this big opening, this big round opening in the hips. And the scientists at that time said, well, this dinosaur's head is so little, it can't think. Its brain isn't big enough to run its body. So then they thought, what if that opening was another brain? What if there was a second brain? And what scientists thought was that he had a brain in the back that ran the back end and a brain in the front that ran the front end. But that's really not very plausible. You can't live with 2 brains. Those 2 brains would be fighting over what they want to do. The brain in the back wants to go that way, and the brain in the front wants to go that way. And the next thing you know, this dinosaur is walking back and forth going, dude, we've got to come to an agreement here. It's just not going to happen. So that opening that you saw in the back of it, that round thing, what they believe that really is they believe that that is where nerves came together, nerve endings. Like you have nerve endings, we have places where they all join together. What scientists think that that opening was a spot where a bundle of nerves came together. Nerves are the things that send signals to the brain that says, hey, we're on fire. Hey, we're hungry. Hey, I got hurt. Those are nerves that they felt. So that's what that was. But when you talk about the Stegosaurus's brain the size of a walnut, or brain the size of a peanut, or brain the size of a golf ball, that one drives me nuts, because here is a picture of the true size and shape of the brain of a Stegosaurus. Next to it is a picture of a walnut. Those brains don't look anything alike. First of all, the brain is way, way bigger than a walnut. And second of all, it's not round. It's actually shaped more like a hot dog. So Stegosaurus does not have 2 brains, and Stegosaurus does not have a brain the size of a walnut. The brain was the size you see in that picture. That's how big the brain was. So if any of you own a book and that book says Stegosaurus's brain was the size of a walnut, from this point forward, your job is to go, oh no, it doesn't. If any of your friends tell you, you know that Stegosaurus's brain the size of a walnut, you go, oh no, it's not. So that is probably the number one. That's the number one thing that drives me crazy when it comes to errors. And here's number 2. It's the spelling and the pronunciation of a dinosaur named Giganotosaurus. You may pronounce it Giganotosaurus. It's perfectly fine. I have seen so many news articles and books that spell its name Gigantosaurus. But Gigantosaurus is wrong. It's missing a letter. It's Giganotosaurus. No, meaning when you say Gigantosaurus, you forgot the no, because no, that's not the answer. Giganotosaurus and Gigantosaurus are two different animals. Here's what happened. When they found Giganotosaurus or Giganotosaurus, again, your pronunciation may be different than mine. When you pronounce the name of a dinosaur, there's not a right or wrong way. Is it Ankylosaurus or Ankylosaurus? Is it Diplodocus or Diplodocus or Diplodocus? Is it Deinonychus or Deinonychus? They're all correct. They're all correct. So don't be upset when somebody pronounces it differently than you pronounce it. So when this dinosaur was discovered, people in the media, I even saw news articles from top name newspapers and TV stations who saw the name Giganotosaurus, but immediately decided that that must have said Gigantosaurus because it's such a gigantic dinosaur. So they made the mistake of thinking Giganotosaurus was Gigantosaurus, and from that point on, it appears in books. I see it all the time, and it literally drives me nuts with that stuff. So it's not Giganotosaurus, it's Gigantosaurus, and yes, there is a dinosaur named Gigantosaurus. It is a long neck, a sauropod. Sauropods, there is a sauropod named Gigantosaurus, but not Giganotosaurus. Giganotosaurus is the meat eater. Gigantosaurus is the plant eater. Now, the one that, this is an understandable mistake. This is a mistake scientists made. It's the famous Apatosaurus Brontosaurus debate. Once and for all, I'm going to explain why there's confusion. In the year 1877, world-famous paleontologist Othniel Marsh named a dinosaur Apatosaurus. When they found the bones of that dinosaur, they didn't have a lot of bones. They had very few bones. Apatosaurus means deceptive lizard. My guess is he named it that because he couldn't really tell a lot about it. Now, because there were not very many bones with it, not a lot of people heard about it because there was nothing exciting. It was a couple of bones. So he named that dinosaur Apatosaurus. Then, in 1879, a new dinosaur was discovered where this one had most of its bones. So the same man, Othniel Marsh, named it Brontosaurus, and that means thunder lizard. And he named it thunder lizard because he thought it was so big when it walked across the ground it probably sounded like thunder. Well, because thunder lizard was so much more complete, every television, or not television back then, every newspaper, every magazine, everybody did a story on the discovery of Brontosaurus because Brontosaurus was so gigantic. Turns out later, somebody came along and looked at the bones of the one called Brontosaurus and compared those to the bones of the one named Apatosaurus, and that scientist concluded those are the same dinosaur. So people my age learned its name was Brontosaurus. But because Apatosaurus got the name first, then that was its legitimate name. So Brontosaurus got the most publicity, but Apatosaurus was named first. So scientists had to go back and say, aha, we made a mistake. Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus are the same thing, so Marsh should have never named this one Brontosaurus. He should have just said we found another Apatosaurus. So I hope that clears up the confusion. Now let me confuse you again. Recently, other scientists went and looked at both sets of bones and they said, you know what? Brontosaurus is different from Apatosaurus. So now some people believe Brontosaurus's name is back on the charts again as being valid. So it was named Apatosaurus. Then it was accidentally named Brontosaurus. Then they took away the name Brontosaurus. Now they're giving it back again. There. Are you confused enough? So am I. And we'll end with the Jurassic Park mistakes. Now let me say for the record, I love Jurassic Park. All of them. Jurassic World, Jurassic Park. I loved them. Loved them. And I am so glad that they made those movies, because even though there were some mistakes in them, those movies did so much for the science of paleontology, we could never repay them. They caused entire generations of paleontologists. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is they finally showed female paleontologists. And that inspired a lot of young girls to grow up to become paleontologists. And that's the best thing for the science, is having both boys and girl paleontologists, because they're very important to science. So let me say again for the record, I love, love, love Jurassic Park. And it was a fictitious movie. It wasn't a documentary. So it was never meant to be a scientific or a scientifically accurate show. But I was frustrated by some of the things that they did, because I don't think they needed to do that. I don't think they needed to make the mistakes they made, because there's no reason. That would be like when Hollywood takes a subject. I don't know why they do this, but they're not happy with facts. They got to add things that are ridiculous. If we ever found a spaceship, if somebody dug up a spaceship and Hollywood heard about it, the first thing people from Hollywood would want to do is come add some cool lights and some cool sound effects to it, because they think that would make it cooler. You're like, dude, it's a spaceship. That's the most amazing thing in the world. But Hollywood's like, yeah, but it'd be cooler if they had smoke coming out of it and if it had laser lights and all. Okay, so that's what they did with the dinosaurs. They took the most amazing things in the world and they made up stuff that they had no reason to. So I'm going to include those in mistakes, even though they meant them and even though they knew they were mistakes. I'm only bringing this up because there's so many young kids who watch those movies and think that what they are watching is a documentary, but it's not. So let me cover some of the mistakes that we see. The first, of course, is the velociraptors. Now, in the movies, and they make velociraptors look giant. But in real life, a velociraptor was a very small dinosaur. He was nowhere near the size that they showed in Jurassic Park. There is a dinosaur named Utah Raptor, which is as big as the one they show in Jurassic Park, but that's not what they chose to use. Instead, they used Velociraptor. So velociraptors are not big, they're very small. The other one that was recent is the one where they made a cast of the inside of the skull of a velociraptor, and then they blew into it and it made a sound, and that was somehow able to communicate. Look, here's the skull of a velociraptor. Here's its nose. There is nothing between its nose and its throat other than there was just sinuses. But there was no sound effect thing. What they made a copy of is up here. Well, that's the brain. So they made a copy of its brain. You cannot make a copy of a brain and blow air through it and it makes sound. Air does not blow through the brain unless you're a politician. Whoa! That was uncalled for. Sorry, I had to say it. So in the movie where they took that out and they blew into it, that could not make sound because that's the brain. You can't blow into a brain and make sound. So I just wanted you guys to realize that that's not realistic. That's not realistic that they were able to communicate with those raptors, because if the raptors made sound, the sound would have come from its throat, not from its brain, okay? Next is the one that most everybody now realizes, and that was the depiction of Dilophosaurus. In the movie, they gave it a frill and they made it spit venom, or that black gooey tar looking stuff. There is absolutely no evidence at all, that occurred. That was strictly something they did in Hollywood to make it more interesting. And I liked it. I want to say that. I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was the coolest looking thing in the world because I think Dilophosauruses are cool. But I just want you kids to remember that in real life, Dilophosaurus did not have a frill around its neck, and in real life, there's no evidence that said that it spit any kind of goo. Remember, Dilophosaurus grows to be 20 feet long. That's a big dinosaur. It doesn't need to spit on anything. And then, of course, there is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, one of these was in the movie. One of them was not. But these are the two things about T-Rex that I want to cover because I think that they're very important. The first is the one about T-Rex's vision is based on movement. That is completely inaccurate. That was totally inaccurate. No reason for them to put that in the movie other than for drama. You see, People like Professor Larry Whitmer, who is with Ohio University. Dr. Whitmer, his career has been spent CAT scanning, CT scanning, the brain cases of prehistoric animals and, of course, modern animals. Well, this is an image of the brain of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And you see that dark blue circle towards the middle where it says optic lobe. That means that that is the part of the brain that is used for vision. How do we know that part is there? Because they compare that brain to both reptiles and birds. So that's why they know that that is the part of the brain that was made for vision. Well, there's a whole lot of its brain being used for vision. If your brain is if most of your brain is used for vision, then your eyesight isn't bad. Your eyesight is excellent, like an eagle's, like a hawk. Their eyesight, a lot of their brain goes to their eyesight to make it powerful. So Tyrannosaurus Rex's eyesight would have been very good. And there's another thing about it. It is one of the few meat eaters whose vision faces forward. When your eyes look straight ahead, you are a hunter. Because the only reason to have your eyes looking forward is to judge distances when you're chasing something. If your eyes are on the side of your head, you're not trying to chase something, you're trying to run away from something. If Tyrannosaurus Rex's eyesight was only based on movement, then it wouldn't want forward-facing eyes. It would want eyes facing to the side so it can look in two different directions to see something that moves. He doesn't want the laser beam focus, because if that's the case, he would have to be looking around like this to see what's going on, and that's not what he does. His eyesight, his vision is made for forward-facing looking, and that's what this dinosaur did. So his vision is not based on movement. If you stood still in front of a T-Rex, it would simply make it easier for him to eat you. That's the only benefit of it. So for those of you that have dinosaur toys at home, or if you pretend to be a dinosaur, things better not be standing still, because you can still see them. Plus you could smell them and you can hear them. So its vision is not based on movement. And finally, it's the big one about it being a scavenger. Now, let me say this for the record. The scientist who said that he thought T-Rex was a scavenger went back and recanted a couple of times and said, well, I'm not saying that's the only answer. I'm just saying that's the possibility. But that news spread like crazy. And now I still have so many adults come up to me when I have my traveling museum, and they'll walk up to the T-Rex and go, that animal is a scavenger. And you go, well, let me explain why. And you try to explain why, but it's an uphill battle sometimes. First, it's vision. If you are a scavenger, you do not have forward-facing vision. If all you eat is already dead, then why would you want eyes facing forward to only see what's in front of you? You want your eyes facing out so you can look around and have a better field of vision. Your eyesight faces forward when you chase something. But the number one reason why, well, no, let me say this. The number two reason why we know it's not a scavenger is because its teeth point backwards. They curve backwards. The only function of, we call them recurved teeth. The only function of teeth that point backwards is for those teeth to hold you, to keep you from running away. It doesn't want you to run away, so it's got teeth that are designed to hold you. Look at the teeth on this little raptor. Here. Its teeth are curved backwards. They're pointing backwards. They do that so that when they grab you with their mouth, you can't run off. If you are an animal that only eats things that are dead, why would you need teeth to hold on to keep them from getting away? See what I mean? So that is one of the reasons. But then the number one reason why I know that these animals are not only scavengers is because they find dinosaurs like Triceratops and I think duckbills who have bite marks from a T-Rex, but the dinosaur escaped because those bite marks began to heal. The wounds healed. That means that animal was alive, that a T-Rex attacked it, and the animal got away. If you are a scavenger, you're not going to try to chase down and eat something that's alive. So, in my opinion, Tyrannosaurus Rex is not a scavenger. Yes, if he found something dead, he would eat it if it was still edible. And yes, he would chase everybody else away from him. Everybody else that he could chase away, he'd steal their food. But most of all, he is a hunter. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's class. Remember the schedule at 10 o'clock this Friday. It is a show on pterosaurs. You're going to love it. Make sure to go to the website, the Dinosaur George Jr. Facebook page, and cast your vote. Make sure to click on your vote as to what you would like to see. And with that, class is over. Have a great day. I will now hang around and answer any questions as long as my voice can last. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.